Hey guys, and welcome back to the JavaScript Mastery Series. And in this video we are going to be learning about the history of JavaScript. Now for this video I'm going to rank the difficulty as white belt. This isn't technically a skill you need to master, but it is a nice prerequisite to mastering the JavaScript language, as knowing the history of something can help you understand what it's been through to get to where it is today, and hopefully by looking at JavaScript's past we can determine a few things about its current state and why it is the way that it is. The birth of JavaScript was in 1995 at a company called Netscape. They had a browser and they wanted their websites running in that browser to have a bit more interaction and be able to do a few things like animation and pop-up. So they hired a guy called Brendan Eich, and he built JavaScript in just 10 days. Yes, 10 days. Funny enough, the language was originally called Mocha, then LiveScript, and then it was finally called JavaScript to piggyback on the back of another popular language at the time, which was called Java. In the late 1990s, a company that you may have heard of called Microsoft entered the scene with their own web browser, Internet Explorer, and they too wanted websites in their browser to be interactive. So they looked at Netscape and saw what they did, and they wanted a piece of that. So they came up with their own version of JavaScript called JavaScript. Now then, this became a problem because now web developers were building websites and they needed to use two versions of JavaScript for each browser, and it became a mess. It became difficult to comply with both browsers. So along came ECMAScript and came up with a specification that all JavaScript across all browsers had to conform to tidy things up and make life easier for developers. Now they just had to develop that one version of JavaScript that would be supported across all browsers. In the early 2000s, JavaScript was still seen as a toy language. You could still do things like pop-ups and basic animations, but that was basically it until the mid-2000s with Ajax. With Ajax, you could now make changes to websites without having to actually refresh the browser. And this made JavaScript essential for rich web applications. And then, just a few years later, in 2008, Chrome released the just-in-time compiler, which became a game changer and drastically improved performance and paved the way for applications like Gmail and Google Maps. Then, not too later, in 2009, we saw the release of the Node.js runtime environment, which then allowed for JavaScript not only to now run in the browser, but it could now run in the server and be used for back-end applications. Then following after that, in the early 2010s, between 2013 to 2016, we saw a drastic increase in loads of JavaScript frameworks. We saw Angular, Vue.js, React, and loads more which have risen and died out. So where does JavaScript stand today? Well, it's the most used programming language in the world. It's still used on the front end. In fact, it has little to no competition on the front end for building front-end applications. The only real competition JavaScript has on the front end is between each of its frameworks. We are seeing a rise of WebAssembly being used to compile applications written in Rust for very high performant applications such as games or video editors. But that's mainly so that it can be used alongside JavaScript instead of a direct replacement. We're also seeing JavaScript being used for desktop standalone applications and mobile applications. So long story short guys, JavaScript is absolutely everywhere, and it's still every reason to master it in 2025. So guys, when we look at the history of JavaScript, what can we learn that can help us understand the language in more depth and why it is the way that it is today. So the first thing is, look, JavaScript was built in 10 days by one person, so there's bound to be mistakes and imperfections, and those imperfections still exist today. The reason why they haven't been removed from the language is because JavaScript wanted to ensure that any old web applications are still backwards compatible today. The second thing that we can learn is what ECMAScript is and why it was created, and what the actual difference between ECMAScript and JavaScript is, because a lot of developers get confused by those two things. And the third thing we can learn is just how important and big JavaScript is, especially for front-end application. It has little to no competition, right? So mastering JavaScript is still super important in 2025, and it's still a high value skill which is going to be critical, whether you just want to build your own web applications or if you just want to be employed as a software engineer.